Hello, ladies.
Good afternoon.
Hi. How's everybody doing?
Great.
Good. All right. Welcome to another episode of Rise and Thrive Women, journeying from surviving to thriving after abuse. We're your hosts, Susie and Heather, and we're so honored you're here. If you've experienced the heartache of toxic relationships, you know the feeling of being lost, broken, and unsure of where to turn next. And this podcast is for you.
We are here to inspire, educate, and empower women like you and Dawn, no matter where you are on your healing journey. Together, we're going to challenge the misconceptions surrounding domestic abuse, explore practical solutions, and listen to incredible survivor stories that remind us all that there is a brighter, better future waiting for you. It's time to rise and thrive and choose yourself. Let's begin this healing journey together.
Awesome. We're so excited to have Dawn here today. We're going to give her the introduction that she is very much due here in a moment. But first of all, what we're talking about today is answering the question that maybe you're thinking about out there. Should you go to couples therapy with your narcissistic partner? And we're going to get Dawn's opinion, which we're very excited to have today, based on the background she has, her personal story, and also get a therapist perspective on this. And we think this is a really important topic because we know, I think all of us could probably say we've been there. When your relationship or your marriage is struggling, one of the first things naturally you turn to is couples therapy. But we have to acknowledge that when you're in a relationship with a narcissist, the circumstances aren't normal. And going to therapy with a narcissistic partner can actually cause damage and can put you in a position that you don't want to be in. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And we will answer any questions that anybody has out there towards the end. So feel free to ask those as we are talking, and then we will get to those as we wrap up our show. So without further ado, I want to introduce Dawn. Like many of us, Dawn's story ultimately led her into the field of counseling. Growing up in an alcoholic family system, she quickly learned to live her life for everyone else and became what everyone needed her to be in order to feel valued and loved. It wasn't until her marriage hit a crisis point that landed her into therapy that she began to discover who she was and why she did the things she did. The healing she received from the process was so life-changing for her. It birthed her in her a dream to help other people experience hope and healing. Dawn is passionate about helping women discover who they are, find their voice, know their worth, enforce healthy boundaries, heal their broken places, grow in healthy relationships, discover their unique purpose and dream, and become the brave women that they are designed to be. Dawn specializes in helping women break free from emotionally abusive relationships, narcissistic abuse, and heal from religious trauma. And I love the quote that's on your website, Dawn. You say, "Behind every face is a story to be told, a voice to be heard, a soul to be healed, and a dream to be discovered." So I thought that was really, really poignant and wanted to share that.
I love that.
So we're so honored to have you here today. And we always like to just start by asking our guests to give a little bit of background. We heard a little bit, obviously, in that introduction, but can you just kind of give us some backstory and what brought you here to the place that you're at today?
Yes, thank you guys for having me. And thank you for just everything that you do to bring awareness to this. It's such an important, I think narcissistic abuse is an epidemic right now. It's everywhere. And if we're not talking about it, who's going to talk about it? And there's lots of people suffering in silence and in isolation. And I think we've got to talk about it. And especially as therapists, we got to talk about it.
Yes.
So thank you for doing this and for inviting me.
Thank you too. Thanks for doing what you do and for being brave to share your story and come on here with us today.
Thank you. This is the stuff that gets me excited, right? Talking about just really important stuff of healing. So yeah, you mentioned I grew up in an alcoholic home and a family system, and you have to figure out how to survive those places. And for me, survival becoming what everybody else needed me to be, and that that was a big part of kind of my conditioning and development. But what was also a big part of it was I was involved in a very high control religious environment that also really praised not having a sense of self. Like the
Being
further under
selfless.
the bush you are, the less.
Yeah.
A lot of self-sacrifice is my
Yeah.
experience with people with religious trauma as well. Sorry, go ahead, Dawn.
So those two things kind of compounded together is really what kind of developed my that kind of hole in your soul, if you will. My needs don't matter. My pain doesn't matter. I don't matter. And you kind of go out into the world and try to prove that you are. Try to prove that you do matter. Try to prove that you are enough. And so that ultimately led me into more relationships where I don't matter. And I think the term for this that many of you probably are aware of is codependency. And my simple definition of codependency at its core is the loss of self. But it's when we equate love with self-abandonment. Right?
Yeah.
Can you say that again for the women in the back?
Codependency at its core is loss of self. It's when we equate love with self-abandonment.
So
in
good.
order to be loved, we have to sacrifice ourselves in our needs and our desires. And when you think about that, that's related to boundaries, it's related to all those things. But I think about it on like a spectrum. At the far end of that spectrum is when we end up in those places where we tolerate abuse, right? So not only do we not matter, but actually we're less than that. We're like, under the bus. And because we haven't kind of healed ourselves, we haven't done that deeper work of knowing our worth and value doesn't come from anywhere out here, right? We can only find that within ourselves. And from an early age, I went outside of myself to try to find those things. Do you think I'm good enough? Do you think I'm valuable? Do you think I'm worthy? Do you think, and everybody else got to decide that for me. And so the healing came for me when you mentioned I started going to therapy. I think you mentioned that I started going.
Yes.
And it hit my own crisis that landed my ass in therapy. And I sat on that couch and I mattered to her.
Yeah.
Right. And for the
I'm just curious, Dawn, were you a therapist at that point? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Had you gotten your okay? I was just curious.
No.
How old were you? Were you in adulthood or?
I don't know how old I was, but I had 4 small children.
Okay.
And at the time, when we hit our crisis, my husband went off to treatment, and I was in the most traumatized space I had ever been in my life. Like that space where you can't eat, you can't sleep, you can't function. And I had 4 other humans to take care of because my world had just blown up and every piece of it was a question mark, So I drove an hour and a half to therapy twice a week.
Wow.
I went to individual and I went to group. But that therapy, it changed me. Like it healed me. And because my therapist saw me and I mattered to her, I started to matter to myself. And that the healing that I received from that kind of burdened me that dream to be able to help other people.
That's awesome.
And I want to highlight that point too, Dawn. I'm sorry. So because what we're finding is there are so many people that are starting to speak up and share their stories. And it's amazing, right? Like we have this epidemic of narcissistic abuse and people who are waking up in relationships like how the hell did I get here? Why do I feel so awful? And how do I make it better? And when you start to do the work on yourself and you read the books, in these books, these self-help books, I found myself lost in that section. They're published 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. Like, this is nothing new, but
Yeah.
the change, like you said, when you do the work within, the change is so profound to us. We find and hold space for other people and spread the knowledge to help them grow and help them get out of that hole as well. So anyway, thank you. It happens so often. And I've talked to even clients who are like, as soon as I'm better, right? Whatever that looks like for you, as soon as I'm better, I can't wait to use my experience to help other people. So,
right. Yeah. What was so you found yourself in therapy. It sounded like very much kind of a crisis point in your life. Can you tell me a little bit about what happened after that? And how long was it until you decided to go the route of becoming a counselor? And what did that look like?
My therapist had the audacity one day to ask me if I've ever thought about being a counselor. And I was like, no. Because one of my core lies is I'm stupid. And that had held me back for a long time because, school was not something that came easy for me. I got my first F in 5th grade. And my interpretation of that was that I'm just not as smart as other people or capable. And so when she said something about going to, be a therapist, all I could see was like grad school. And I'm just like, oh, I can't do that. But I lost my mind and decided, well, I guess I'm doing that. And so I did. I had four kids, and I just said, the change that happened in me was so powerful. I had to. It's like I didn't have a choice. It's like, okay, now I got to do this. Damn it. And I'm gonna tell you what, it's a miracle that I made it through grad school. When I tell you I cried through every 12-page paper that I had to write, like
it's no joke.
2 a.m. in the morning,
right?
Because I had 4 kids, and that's the only time my brain could even function. But you know what? Like, I don't know how I did it, but I did it. And awesome. I'm telling you, I have the best job in the world, but my clients make me brave. And what actually got me into this is because I started having people just come in droves that were dealing with narcissistic abuse. And I got more and more education on it. And then I realized, oh, actually, I'm dealing with this in my own family system. And I would be like, helping them make brave steps. And I was like, I would say this often. I was like, I don't think you can understand narcissistic abuse unless you've experienced it. And then I realized, wait, how do I understand this if I'm not experiencing it? And it was like, you know what? I operate from the premise, I don't ask my clients to do anything I'm not willing to do myself. And my clients had to do some really brave things to step out of the abuse that they were under. And that's why I say they helped me be brave, right? My situation was a little bit different because I was a therapist and so was he. And we were doing therapy together. And so it was a lot to kind of see through.
I'm sure.
Because, like we're going to kind of talk about today, see through to see, oh my gosh, me too. Oh my gosh, this is happening to me too.
That's actually
a perfect. Sorry, go ahead, John. Go ahead. I'm going to let you be the boss.
Well, I was just going to segue into the next question, right? Because you were talking about him being a therapist, you being a therapist, and then you guys actually going to therapy together. And so, because we wanted to spend some time talking about that, can you tell us a little bit about your experience with going to counseling with a narcissistic abuser and what your advice is to our listeners and viewers? Like, as a licensed therapist, what would you tell people who are looking to go to couples therapy with someone who may suspect they're in a narcissistic or narcissistically abusive relationship?
Mhm. Yeah, and I talk about this kind of from a personal angle, but also as a therapist. It's so vulnerable going to therapy. And when abuse is present, that's not a marriage problem, right? It's not a marriage issue.
Mhm.
And I think that's kind of the big difference there. Like when you think
Mhm.
about, I know for me, I was so vulnerable. I was just like, somebody, please help me. And you go to couples therapy and they just ask you to do more. They ask you to give
Right.
more. They ask you to, you know, um, so in my opinion, when abuse is present, that's not something that's not a communication problem. That's a power and control issue, right?
Mhm.
That's not two people showing up to say, hey, this is my side of this and this is my side. How do we make this better? Right? Like how do we work together, and how do I learn to love you and you learn to, and honestly, listen, I'm a huge proponent of couples therapy when you're dealing with
Right.
two healthy people. I mean,
Absolutely.
it
It can
can
be
be the most
super
powerful
beneficial.
thing in
Yeah.
this world. I mean, the
Absolutely.
sky's the limit when two people are showing up and doing the work and want to learn,
Right.
how to heal themselves and how to heal each other. Like it's powerful. So I am a proponent of that. But I've seen the devastating effects of it when you go in and there's abuse present.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. What are some ways that abusers can manipulate or use therapy against their victims? What are some examples that you have either
Well,
experienced yourself or are aware of being a therapist?
I would
Sorry.
say abusers are skilled manipulators,
Mhm.
masterful manipulators, and therapy just becomes another thing they can use against you,
Mhm.
um,
It's like a little
to
playground,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, and it infuriates me,
Mm.
honestly. But so they're masterful manipulators, but they're also masterful actors. I mean, they could win Oscars for their acting.
Yeah.
um, and
Yes.
so the first thing I have on here is playing the victim, like twisting the narrative, making themselves the wounded party. Um,
Mhm.
there is a victim in the room, but that he's not it. Um, but when you don't know that, when you're the one that always kind of takes the blame and assumes that it's you, it's just another environment. Now we're inviting another person to get to speak into all the things you need to do to change and be a better spouse,
Right.
Right. Yeah.
So
So then
they're not
then
honest people.
right. And they can use that scenario to, I guess, cement that message that they've been telling their victim by getting the therapist to agree. Yeah.
Absolutely. And
Mhm.
that's the next thing. It's like you get the therapist on your side. It's like even the therapist said you needed to watch your tone, or even the therapist said, like it's so much manipulation that happens. And I don't think the goal for them is to resolve anything.
Right.
I think it's
Right.
for them to maintain control.
Mhm.
Right. And
And
to solidify the lie that I mean, what you said a second ago was really powerful. Like, we're going to therapy to work on our marriage, but in reality, what happens is I get more responsibility. Not,
right.
if I'm not happy with something, I have to figure out a way to solve that problem myself. If you
Mm,
don't like, a feeling that I had about something you said to me, then I need to just change the way I feel about it, or I need to change my perception of it, because you're going to gaslight me or harass me and constantly attack me until I submit. And so I think that's a really good thing for people to understand. If you're in therapy currently with someone that you may suspect is toxic or just confrontational or just complicated in general, if you're going to therapy with anxiety, that I don't think that it's meeting the goal.
Yeah.
And if you're finding yourself leaving therapy with more things that you are now accountable for and you don't feel like the load is equal, I think that's a good indicator that you probably should either find a different therapist, maybe even an individual therapist, or reevaluate whether or not this relationship is right for you. So
absolutely. And speaking of this, like, it's so important that you trust your gut, right? when you're walking out of therapy crying every time because you're the problem, it's just like that. Hold up, wait a minute. We got to pay attention to this.
Right. Yeah. Or even I think that you kind of alluded to this earlier, not only the scenario where you feel you're the problem, but even that the message that I think probably comes through in normal scenarios of couples therapy is that it takes two. It takes two to tango. Everybody plays their role in the disagreements and the arguments. And even that messaging can be harmful too for somebody who's in an abusive relationship.
Yeah.
Say that one louder for the people.
Yeah.
I've heard that an amazing
Doesn't
times
always.
from my people.
Right.
Well, it takes two. There's two sides to every story. And, I thought so too. But turns out when abuse is the problem, when abuse is part of the equation, it's just not true.
Yeah.
It's just not true.
Right. 100%,
I agree.
100%.
And so I think it's also important. I have another question for you, but before I go into that, I also think it's really important to understand that not just because someone is a licensed therapist doesn't mean that they're trained in identifying these different abuse tactics. And so when you are looking for a therapist, I highly recommend that you kind of review some of the information that they have on their website to understand what type of field they specialize in. And with that said, Dawn, can you help our listeners understand how to identify whether or not you have a safe therapist?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would just say this is super, super, super important. You have to have safety to heal. I mean, you have to. And personally, like I said earlier, I just don't think people can understand it if they haven't been through it. I just haven't found people that, unless they've experienced it in one way or another. And so ask the therapist, are you familiar with this, right? Do you work with this? And if they don't, you're going to probably get yourself, more harm than good in that situation.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
Green flags for a safe therapist. They believe you. We have to believe victims. We have to believe people when they say, I'm hurting, I'm suffering, this is what's happening. Oh goodness. We have been conditioned, I think, as a society to turn a blind eye to abuse, or just to assume that the victim is lying. I don't know how we got to this point, but that's not typically what victims do.
Right. Yeah.
To speak up and say, I'm hurting in the first place. But then when you do and you're not believed, the damage that comes from that, especially from a therapist, Absolutely.
It solidifies the lie. It solidifies the lie.
Yeah. And I just think as therapists, we have a responsibility, right? We have power. Your words have power, and you have to take that seriously. And if you don't know how to deal with this, don't try to, but certainly don't minimize the pain that's in front of you.
Right.
So, just understanding abuse. I mean, there's great therapists that are, they're all about boundaries and all, but they've never dealt with abuse. They don't understand manipulation and power and control.
Yeah.
And when you don't understand that, in this situation, it's not going to be helpful.
Right.
I think encouraging autonomy, like our job as therapists is to empower you, right? Our job is to help you see you, know you, love you, trust you, and that you're capable of making wise decisions. So if you're coming to me and saying, everything in my body is screaming at me, then I'm going to say, hey, I think we need to listen to that. Our body's always communicating with us. But that's the disconnect that happens, right? I'm a trauma therapist. The essence of trauma is disconnect from yourself. When you're dealing with abuse victims, you're dealing with a traumatized individual, right? They have trauma from their past, but they're being traumatized in the now, right now.
Yep.
And so part of what we have to do is empower them that they matter, right? But let's start listening to your body. Let's start listening. Is your anxiety through the roof? Baby, it's trying to tell you something. We got to start listening.
Right. Yeah.
And as far as anxiety, what we don't realize about what that is, it's an alarm in our body that's going off. And it's a wounded part of us that's trying to get our attention.
Yeah.
Right. We don't even know that. Some of us don't know life without anxiety. It's so normal to us. And we will run 1,000 miles per hour in the other direction to not feel it. In actuality,
yeah.
To not feel it, or fearful that we're going to repeat the past.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. So we don't realize that all that is going to be part of our healing. Like our body is not our enemy. Our self is not our enemy. Like that's part of what got ingrained in us when we learned at a young age that we don't matter, or that we're not capable, or that we're stupid, or that we're not enough. Right?
Yeah.
And so, okay. So the next thing, trauma informed. I just talked about trauma.
Yeah.
In my mind, trauma is behind everything. In my mind, everything that's playing out today in the present is deeply connected to what we've been through and the belief systems that we have formed.
Yes.
I would also add to that, sorry, Dawn, family systems, which can lead to trauma, right?
Yeah.
Depending on what your family system is. But yeah, I think family systems is a big one.
Oh, it's huge. We just pass trauma down. We just pass it right down to the next person until someone decides to feel it and heal it.
For sure.
Right. And say no more. Yeah.
So we signed right on up for that one, didn't we?
We did.
Healers and healers.
Yeah.
Yep.
A lot of these women that are breaking free, they're breaking cycles. They're the cycle breakers. They're the ones that are finally saying, I don't know what this is, but I do not want this anymore. And I certainly don't want my kids to do this.
Yeah.
For some of us, our kids are our fiercest motivators, right?
Yeah.
I have 4 daughters. I have 4 daughters. I never want them to settle for what I settled for. I never want them to not know their worth and their value and try to go outside of themselves to find it.
Right. Such a good lesson to teach.
Yeah, absolutely. They motivate me, and I want them to learn things a whole lot than I did.
I'm with you on that one. Yeah. Yes. Any other green flags that to think about for choosing a therapist?
Yeah, they don't blame you.
Yes, that one's very important. We don't want to leave that one out.
Yeah.
They don't blame you for the abuse.
If you don't feel safe, you're going to feel safe with a green flag therapist, right? there's going to be something in you that feels safe and just knows, okay, I can be myself right now. I can be honest, and I'm not going to be shamed and judged and all those things.
Right. And they get it. I think that kind of circles back to the beginning of like somebody who understands this type of abuse is so validating and so comforting, to know that that person sitting across from you gets it. So
yeah, that's so true, because you really get it, and these people just need to be seen and known and loved, and that's what you're do.
For sure. What about the red flags? What are some things for people to look out for that could be a red flag in a therapist?
So pushes couples therapy, right? If they were just like, no, we need keep pushing it, rather than, what I think is better in that situation is individual therapy. And honestly, we can't change anybody else. The only person we can change is ourself. So the individual therapy, I highly, highly, highly recommend that if this is something that you are in. The mutual, right? That mutual thing. Okay, so this is your part and this is your part, and like, all of the typical couples therapy stuff. We just got to throw it out the window when you're dealing with abuse, because it's way more harmful than helpful. When you're not dealing with someone that's playing the same game, right? They're not playing fair. They're not playing by the same rules. They're not. And when you show up vulnerably, and they show up to take advantage of your vulnerability, you're gonna come out wounded in that situation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Minimizing harmful behavior. Oh, well, they just had such a hard childhood, and and I'm like, and you know what?
Yeah,
I get it. We can have compassion for that, and this is not okay. It's both and.
Yeah.
Yes, we have compassion. This is not okay.
Right.
Period.
Totally. Yes.
A lot of times in the church world, it's just all about saving the marriage at the expense of the people. And so I would just caution that, anyone that's saying saving your marriage is more important than saving yourself, does a lot of. Some marriages can't be saved. Some shouldn't be saved.
Right.
And you can't save anything. It takes two people to make a marriage. My mama says this. It takes two people to make a marriage. It takes one to break it. And you can't. You can't. You will be trying to do that for an eternity and never succeed. The only way,
especially with a narcissist.
Oh yeah, the only way to make these relationships work is to lose yourself, and that's the thing we're not doing.
Also, when it comes to like spiritual belief systems, I'm all about spirituality, but I want to emphasize what you just said. When you walk into therapy that are based in religion, especially organized religion, it's very biased, and they go into it with the mindset that everyone is capable of change, and they demonize the behaviors. It's almost like the justification is, it's Satan, and we can fix that, right? Like God can fix that. And it keeps people in abuse wheels. It really does, because it makes them believe that they have to constantly show unconditional love to someone who is abusing them. And instead of identifying it as abuse, they identify it as some sort of spiritual attack. And that wasn't the it wasn't the person they were with, it was another entity that caused him or her to do that. So I just want to emphasize how important it is that if you are seeking therapy and it is religious based, if you're feeling like you're not getting what you're supposed to get out of it, don't be afraid to seek individual therapy elsewhere that isn't biased, or even raise your hand and say, I'm not doing this anymore. Like I don't feel like I'm being heard and I need another opinion. Or even I want to make that clear, because the spiritual aspect of that, like when you walk into like these hardcore Christian or Baptist church with leaders who are therapists or even act as therapists based on their spirituality, that can do so much more harm than good, because you're intertwining abuse along with something that has been embedded and ingrained in their mind, and they use religion against you. So
I mean, say that again for the people.
The struggle is real. I could go on about some horror stories I've heard from people that have gone to religious-based therapy, and there are women who have been kicked out of their churches because they got a divorce and the elders told them they should not get a divorce, and even so much as went to tell them who they were allowed to talk to about the issues in their marriage. And some of those issues were addiction, right?
Yeah.
So it can be dangerous.
I've heard those stories too.
Yeah. And then you lose your community and your marriage. And you lose all of your support system in like the most crucial part of your life. So
Listen, I know people, I have very close friends that have experienced this, right? And their husband was the pastor. Those systems, those cult systems, they protect the abuser at the expense. And she lost her community. She was completely abandoned because she called out the abuse. Honestly, I have seen churches not handled as well at all. I have seen churches that have become partakers in the abuse and in the trauma. And many victims that have given their life to the church, right? As like the most, the biggest servant's heart and all of those things. And as soon as they speak up and expose something, they're they're shamed,
banished, right? Yeah. Well, it kind of all circles back to encouraging people to trust their gut and that personal autonomy that you talked about, that if something doesn't feel right and you don't feel like you're being heard, you do get to decide what you do. You get to decide if that's not the right space for you, or if it's not the right church for you, or whatever that might be. Just a reminder to people that you get to decide that, and trust your gut, trust that inner voice that's telling you this isn't right.
Right.
So 100%.
And if you're here and you're listening to this and you're already on that track, there's a part of you that's like, oh, hell no. Like something's not right here. Listen to that. I call her my little hell, right? Listen to your hell no girl, because she's the one. And she's the one, knows you deserve better. Listen to her.
Right.
Yes.
That's, if there's one takeaway for people, let it be that. And don't
listen to your hell no girl.
Listen to the hell no girl. No. I love it.
She loves you.
Yes. Were there any other red flags we didn't talk about when it comes to just to make people aware of with their therapist? I think we covered quite a few of them.
Yeah, I mean, I think but I would just say it's super, super, super important that you find a safe therapist.
Yeah, for sure. What advice would you give to someone? Because I'm thinking about the person who, and when you're in a relationship with someone who's narcissistic, and again, the natural thing to do when you're in a marriage and you're struggling is to go to couples therapy. So if your narcissistic partner is pressuring you to go to therapy together, and if you're being hesitant towards that, I could see a narcissistic person using that against you to say, well, you don't care about this marriage, you're not putting in the work, blah blah blah. What advice do you give to that person who is feeling that pressure and almost getting, shamed over not going? What advice would you give?
Well, the same. I would say trust your gut, but get your own personal help.
Right. And encourage them to do the same. So, in lieu of couples therapy, I think it would be best if I do my own therapy, you do yours, we can reevaluate. But at least then there's some action being taken to help the marriage. I was just curious. I feel like people can get into that. They can get stuck in that space where they feel like, well, I have to do this, otherwise I'm going to get in trouble, or he's going to think I don't care, or whatever.
Oh yeah. Do you feel obligated? Feel guilty? Yeah. And all that's coming from people that don't understand what you're going through. Right. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, I feel like this experience can be one of the loneliest experiences on the planet.
Yeah.
Because you are the targeted one, right? Your abuser is targeting you. Someone could be sitting right next to you and not see what's happening to you. Okay.
Right.
I also think because we get so isolated, and I feel like I don't want to project, but in my experience, I knew something was wrong with me. I knew something was wrong. I felt like something was wrong with me. And I felt so alone, and I didn't understand how to make it better. And then once I started to educate myself and understand, these aren't just conflicts that keep arising. These are actual abuse cycles. They're just disguised as conflicts. But we feel so alone and so isolated. And then once you start to really expand on what these narcissistic abuse tactics are, whether or not they're diagnosable doesn't matter anymore. It's like you expand your knowledge on what these tactics are. And then as you start researching and you start seeing other people out there, it's like they're telling your story, right? Like, you heard my story, it sounded like your story. I heard your story, it sounded like mine, and vice versa. And then you don't feel alone anymore. You realize, holy shit, this is happening everywhere. And there's just reassurance in that alone. Like, I'm not crazy.
Right.
I'm not crazy.
You're not crazy. That's one of our mottos here. You are not crazy. When we have my groups here, that's one of our mottos. You are not crazy.
Right. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Well, maybe we shift gears a little bit and just talk about just kind of the toll that abuse takes on our self-worth. You mentioned earlier on in our conversation that one of your old beliefs about yourself was that you're stupid. And that was something that was maybe a bit of a barrier for you, even pursuing higher level education. So, and I'm sure there was other messages that were ingrained in you through childhood and through an abusive marriage. How did you overcome those beliefs, those negative beliefs, and rebuild your self-worth after abuse?
Yeah. And I think that's where you start really focusing right here, right? It's when you sit your ass down on the couch, and for a lot of people, when you sit on the couch because some type of crisis got you there, and you ask that question, who am I? We have no idea. We have zero idea of who we are. Or you ask the question, well, okay, tell me how you're feeling. I have no idea, right? Because we are so
Aren't you going to tell me how I'm feeling? Like, yeah.
And so it's just starting that journey of discovering who this girl is, right? And kind of doing that thing where we start to get curious about where these things are coming from. How did I get in a space where I'm allowing someone to disrespect me so poorly? Where did I learn this from, right? And then you start looking back to the places in your life that you learned these things. and you go back and you find that little girl and you see her and you know her and you love her and you reparent her, right? You replace those lies with truth. You reconnect. The essence of trauma is disconnect from yourself. So healing is about wholeness. And so you reconnect with that girl. I do something called art therapy, ART, accelerated resolution therapy, where we actually use our imagination and we go back. And the first thing we do with that girl is we just hug her and we just hold her. And it is the most powerful thing to see people reconnect with that little girl that we've learned not to see and know and love.
I love that.
It
makes me want to cry. I need to go hug myself.
Everybody hug yourself.
Yeah, let's do it all. Yes. Yeah. It's a good practice.
And you're worth it, baby. And, all of our lives, we fought for everybody else. We've got to fight for this girl. And it's like you fiercely start loving this girl. You don't ever let anybody mistreat her again, right? Your little hell no girl she's getting louder and louder and we're listening. And, you start fighting for her and you listen to her, because so much of what we had to do in order to survive is just keep kicking her down the road and saying, be quiet. Yeah. You don't matter. And so it's just a process of taking your power back. That little girl didn't have power, but you have power today. And it's like she needs what you have. And you go back there and sometimes you have to make amends to her. I am so sorry for abandoning you. It wasn't your fault, right? And we scoop her up and we say, you're safe with me now. And you bring her home. And we do that with all of our little girls. And we challenge those lies that we believe, that we don't matter, that we're not enough, that we're not worthy, and you say, you're absolutely worthy, right? We're reparenting ourselves. We're giving ourselves what we didn't get back then.
I feel like that's like the first step of really, one, accepting and learning how to love yourself. But it's almost like setting that foundation of really loving yourself enough to learn how to establish a boundary, right? Like that hell no girl, like that's who's establishing your boundaries. And that's where that's like your first learned value when you start going to therapy. Like what you're talking about, that's what's coming up for me is all of this stuff works, and what it does on the outside or externally, what you see happening is someone who finally starts to say, you know what, I do love myself. I'm going to heal that inner child. And now going forward, she's protected. And these are the boundaries. And this hell no girl is going to be the one who establishes and maintains that those boundaries stick.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. That's such great advice.
Yes. So we're taking our power back. We're taking our power back. And, I tell my clients, I want you to heal, but I don't just want you to heal. I want you to thrive. I want you to dream again. I want you to be all the things that you were designed to be, because you deserve that. You're worth that. And I think that's until we learn how to love ourselves, it's impossible to love someone else in a healthy way.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have to learn how to love this girl first.
Yeah.
And when we get all of that kind of squared away and we know our worth and our value and our hell no girl is, we become untouchable. Because when we run into the people out here that say you're not good enough, we're like, you don't get access to me. I know who I am, and I know my worth and my value. Yeah. You're not for me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Heather.
Oh, that's okay. Just really quick, because I know we're running out of time. What advice would you give to the woman who has found herself in an abusive relationship and is struggling to leave?
First of all, I would say I see you and my heart breaks for you. And you're not alone. unfortunately, there's a lot of us that understand this. And it's not your fault. It's not. I'll be the first to tell you that. Seek out support. Don't try to heal in isolation. Find your safe people. Go to a therapist that understands. Get that healing. And I would say trust your gut, right? Start to listen and pay attention to all the things that are going on inside of you, and you work on reconnecting all of these parts. Safety first. Now, for some of these situations, they are very dangerous. I would say, which is why I think it's really important that you're seeing, getting someone to help you with this that understands narcissistic abuse, because exiting from these relationships have to be done very carefully. And you have to be strong enough to handle it and have your boundaries and your things in place for that.
Right. Yeah. There's things that come after the leaving that are important to know and to be aware of, for sure. Yeah. More reason to find somebody who understands.
Oh, the post-separation abuse can be worse.
Yeah.
Can be brutal.
Yeah, it can.
So support is going to be so important for you. Support is so important. So being a part of like what you guys have going on is excellent. Excellent. Let's see. You don't need their permission. You don't need anybody's permission to do your own healing journey. It's about you. You get to decide it. No one can do it for you, and no one can take it from you. Don't wait for a narcissist to give you permission. And don't wait for someone who doesn't understand abuse and any of these things to give you permission. You don't need that. We give you permission right now. You have all in the world to learn how to know yourself, love yourself, and pursue your healing. And then I put on here, prepare for manipulation. That's part of, oh, they're gonna change. Oh, I'm gonna change, and I know everything I did to hurt you, and I'm different now, and I'm, all of those things. Be prepared so that we don't slide right back into the manipulation. Unfortunately, the truth about these people is they don't typically change. Research shows they don't typically change. So
it takes a lot of work, right? A ton.
A lot of individual deep trauma work. And for many narcissists, they refuse to see their shame and their guilt and deal with it. So that's why they project it on everyone else.
Right.
You deserve more. You're not crazy. And I, like I said, you matter. You're worth it. Like, do it for you. Don't do it for even anybody else. Do it for you, because you matter. And there's more people out here that do see you and understand and want to help you get up and heal and thrive, right? And all of those things. So please get help. Like, please invest in yourself and let yourself get the healing that you deserve.
100%.
Because you deserve.
Yes.
Well said, Dawn.
Yes, so many good pieces of advice. And I just want to highlight, your expertise. And if people are looking to connect with someone who is a therapist and who is knowledgeable in this area, Dawn, turn to Dawn. Heather and I are coaches, and we run businesses too, but we believe there's enough out there for everyone. And we believe everyone brings their own unique skills and knowledge. And we want viewers to be able to find you if they connect with you, especially if you want to have a therapist that said like ass and like the swear words that you drop. I love that.
The hell no girl. If you need somebody to help you find that hell no girl within, she's your girl.
Yeah, exactly. So I know you've got a website called embraceyourbrave.org, so people can find information on how to work with you there. Same handle on Instagram. You're at embrace.your.brave on Instagram. You can also find Dawn over on Facebook by searching her name, as well as LinkedIn. And I know you do have some materials and resources over on Psychology Today. So I've linked all of your website, your social handles here within our YouTube show notes, so people can find your information there. Any other tips on finding you? Or those are kind of the best way, is just searching, going to your website.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. And you can work with, as a therapist, are you mainly then working with people in your state, or have you, I know you were looking at coaching to be able to work with more people outside of your state.
I'm a coach too, so I
Okay.
can help far and wide.
Anywhere. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. All right.
All those things. Yeah.
Great. Well, don't hesitate to reach out to Dawn. And Dawn, we were just so thrilled to have you on today. You shared so much great information. You're an excellent resource. And you are a member of our Rise and Thrive Women group as well over on Facebook. So for those of you listening who aren't over there on our group, it's a group for women only. We have a spectrum of people that are in there, people who are in their abusive relationships and people who are out and on the healing path. So lots of great women in that group. So please join us over there if you're interested.
Link in bio to get to that.
Yeah.
For those on Instagram, if you want to head over to my bio, I have a link tree and a link directly to that group.
Yes. Did we have any questions come in from your side, Heather, as we were talking to Dawn?
There were. I mean, we had Amy tune in again, and she was just, my estranged husband charmed the therapist. She seemed to always take his side. And then she also said, I thought I was just being a good wife by putting my needs aside. There were just people chiming in and kind of feeling just relating to what we were talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hi, everybody out there. Hi, Amy. Thanks for joining. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to any of us or leave your comments on our videos, and we will definitely circle back and answer any questions you have. So with that, are we ready to close it out?
Yes, ma'am. So thank you all for joining on this episode of Rise and Thrive Women. We hope today's conversation has inspired you to take charge of your healing journey. Whether it's new perspective, renewed hope, or the courage to move forward, it's something worth celebrating.
And remember, your story is still unfolding and your past does not define you. Within you lies strength, power, and limitless potential. So embrace it. Trust and follow your intuition with courage. Be bold, be brave, and always trust yourself. Until we meet again, take care, rise above, and thrive.
Bye.
All right. Bye, everybody.